Hello, welcome back to Movies with Tana. It's so nice to say welcome back. Okay, today we're gonna talk about one of my favorite movies of all time. It's the old Pink Panther movies with Peter Sellers, and these are what most people would call the original Pink Panther movies. And so we're gonna talk about two movies today. The first one was the just called The Pink Panther, and it was made and released in 1963. And the second one we're going to talk about today is The Return of the Pink Panther. And it was released almost 10 years later in 1975, so that's 12 years later. And what I've never seen the original first Pink Panther movie until I watched it for this video. I've only ever watched The Return of the Pink Panther, and it's been quite literally my favorite movie of all time. Just I've seen a lot of movies, and this is a movie that I can always come back to, and it still makes me laugh every time. Like I rewatched it for this video, and it still made me laugh. Like I was watching it for the first time. It's my favorite movie of all time. So this video is gonna be a little bit different than I think the first episode with when I was talking about Choti Si Baat, wherein I'm not gonna spoil a lot about this movie and just kind of talk about some stylistic things that I found very fascinating between the two movies, because there's such a difference in style and craft in the way these movies were made, and even in terms of story. And I found that to be the most fascinating thing about watching these two movies. And I really want to make this show about encouraging people to watch these movies. So with Choti Si Baat, what I found it felt I don't know what the word is I'm looking for, but it felt right to kind of share some moments from the movie with you, because I wanted to use those to explain what I was talking about in terms of character moments and stuff like that. But for this movie, anything that I mentioned is like too much of just it's something to be experienced, because these movies were, especially the Return of the Pink Panther, is perfect as a movie from start to finish, from the first frame to the last frame. I, if I could, I would not want to spoil a single thing, and I'm probably not going to spoil that much of it now, but it's something that you really get the full effect of when you watch it, and not when you hear someone talk about it, because I've spoken about it a lot. And every time I show it to someone rather than talk to them about it, they have a much better experience watching it, because it's so amazing. I still I think I'm having to talk about it now, but I still can't wrap my head around how well made this movie is. I'm a big fan of this movie. Okay, so we're gonna get into the credits now of the both the movies. So interestingly enough, both The Pink Panther from 1963 and The Return of the Pink Panther in 1975 were both directed by the same guy, Blake Edwards, but they were also co-written by someone else. Blake Edwards wrote both scripts, but he had two different co-writers. For the Pink Panther, he had a co-writer called Maurice Richlin, or Richlin, depending on the pronunciation, and he had another writer with him for Return of the Pink Panther called Frank Waldman. And I don't know if this was such a big difference in the just the co-writers, or maybe it was a product of the time, but it's like there's absolutely like a handful of similarities between the two movies, and it's just this writer credits that were different and made such a difference. You'll see as I get deeper into it, but I just wanted to point that out, that Blake Edwards was involved with both movies, and I very clearly like the second movie a lot better. So that 12 years made such a difference in the way that he told stories is quite fascinating. Okay, so The Pink Panther, 1963, directed by Blake Edwards. It was shot by a man named Philip Lathrop. It had Peter Sellers. I'm stuttering a lot today. It had Peter Sellers as the main detective extraordinaire, Jacques Clouseau. It had David Niven as Charles Lytton or the Phantom. It had an actress called Cap- Cappuccini. I'm not sure how to pronounce her name, but she played uh, Jacques Clouseau's wife, Madame Clouseau, or Simone Clouseau. You had Claudia Cardinal, who played Princess Dala, and you have Robert Wagner, who played the Phantom's nephew. George. He played George Lytton, the Phantom's nephew. That's for the Pink Panther. Then, in the second one, Return of the Pink Panther, you have David. You have. I don't know why I'm stuttering so much. This is so odd. You have Blake Edwards again coming back as the director, but you have Frank Waldman now as his co-writer, and you have a different cinematographer. You have Geoffrey Unsworth, who did a fantastic job with this movie. I That's what I'm just constantly jumping the gun and talking about the second movie, but I really want to get through the Pink Panther first, because I really want to. Once I talk about that, my appreciation for the second one will become abundantly clear. But I need to get through these credits. So yeah, cinematography by Geoffrey Unsworth, fantastic cinematography. Uh, Again, stars Peter Sellers as Clouseau, which was probably the best decision they made out of everything. But they also added a few more characters that weren't there in the original movie, and these have become like staple characters of the Pink Panther movies, where you have Herbert Lom, who plays Chief Inspector Dreyfuss, who is the sort of Clouseau's like the person who hates Clouseau the most in Clouseau's life is Chief Inspector Dreyfuss, and is just Herbert Lom plays him so hilariously and so iconically that I don't think anyone else could replace his performance of this character who cannot stand Clouseau. You also have Christopher Plummer, very famous Christopher Plummer. I'm a big fan of his as well, who plays the new and improved and reinvented Charles Lytton, aka the Phantom, and he plays a much more suave, sophisticated, very like James Bondy version of the Phantom compared to the first movie, where David Niven plays a very like old man bachelor type Phantom. Both very suave characters and men, but played just slightly differently, and then makes all the difference. Then you have Catherine Schnell, who plays Claudine Lytton, who is um, Charles Lytton's wife in the movie, and she plays quite a big role, which I think is a product of just better storytelling and also a little bit product of the time. A lot of the first movie I feel like is a victim to the time period it was set in, which it gets quite fascinating as I watch the movie, but that I think is a big thing that Claudine Lytton is a main character of of the movie Return of the Pink Panther, wherein the Pink Panther, the women characters are there, and they're definitely main characters that are women, but they're not given the same type of agency or importance to the story that you get in the second film. And you have Bert, and I cannot pronounce his last name, but it's K. It starts with a K, and I just don't want to try and guess this pronunciation. And he basically plays, I think, the most iconic character apart from Clouseau, who's Cato, who is Clouseau's housekeeper slash butler slash assistant plus slash helping around guy who's kind of with him, and is his kind of partner, his unofficial partner. There are a lot of problems with Cato's representation in the movie, which we'll discuss, but for the story's sake and nostalgia's sake, Cato is a fantastic character, and apart from a lot of the problematic usages of Cato. I think he's one of the funniest characters in the whole movie. Okay, now we are gonna talk about the opening animated sequences. Sorry about that. The cough's never gonna go away. It's my perpetual cold. We're gonna talk about the opening animated sequences. Both of these movies have some of just the best animated sequences that I've ever seen of all time. And one just gets elevated by the next one. The first one is just a really nice spectacle of really chic, like art deco, very stylish motion graphics. And from the like in the 60s, this all had to be hand drawn and hand animated. So the fact that it's done in so smooth and stylish, and it feels like you're watching, something being painted on screen, I find it very, very beautiful. And it's if to see it, if I had seen this for the first time, it would have blown me away like completely. It's a very, very well done opening title sequence that just sets up this beautiful sets up the beautiful look of the film, both films, and that you come to watch. So I'm going to talk about the opening animated sequences for both of the movies. Just phenomenal for both of them. There's a big step up one from the first to the second one, like with the whole movie in general. But really, what I love about them is that they're these beautiful, like, Art Deco, if that makes sense, Art Deco style sequences that just showcase these beautiful typography sequences and animations, these beautiful motion graphics and shape animations, which like in the 60s and 70s would all have to be hand animated, and they wouldn't have had a computer or like keyframing or anything like that to do. So to visualize this and draw this is something that I still like. It was just an awe to watch, and it's easily one of my favorite bits from both movies is those opening sequences, because they're so creative and they're packed with so much visual detail that it's it's just quite amazing. I don't know what else to say. I always struggle with this is because these are a lot about these movies is stuff that I just love, and I just love it because it speaks to me immediately. It doesn't um, have a lot of to do with a lot of thinking. It's just I see it and I have this sort of nostalgic feeling, but it also, even now, I find new things that I like about it, where I'll see a new detail in the animation, or I'll see a little joke that they had put in there, and every time I watch it, I feel like I'm learning something new about the detail that was put into both of these movies, and I think I love it for that reason. So now we're going to talk about some of the problems of the first movie. It's very clear that this first movie was like a big test run of the Pink Panther like mythos and characters, like Clouseau's whole like character, and to make this movie a comedy but also like a sort of heist movie and a crime noir story. So you have a lot of story conflictions and a lot of just like visual conflictions, and a lot of like the movie keeps jutting between like really nice hilarious slapstick comedy, and then goes on the other direction to like a really dramatic scene about flirtation and seduction, and it's very much like watching a heist movie or something more akin to an Ocean's movie, or a movie where it's more dramatic and it's a more of a deep character study of a movie. Where Pink Panther movies are not character study movies; they're just pure slapstick comedy that Peter Sellers pulls off, like without a sweat. And I feel like I'm saying a lot, but that's the problem with this first movie, is that they didn't really know how to use Peter Sellers and use that character of Clouseau, so they kind of focused more on the Phantom character, and they focused on his part of the story where he meets the mark of Princess Dala, who owns the Pink Panther diamond, and his kind of method in trying to seduce her and kind of win her over. And if that was it, and you kind of had to, you were seeing it in one way or the other, where you saw that okay, he is blatantly doing this, or you saw that okay, you see all of these things unfold. You like see him meeting her for dinner, you see him meeting her at a party, you see him do all of these things, but the audience, you don't know that he's doing this and that he's the Phantom. If that was there, in either or of those situations, it would still be a little bit more appealing. What the movie does is it can't decide whether it wants to tell you the truth, what's happening or not. There'll be some parts of the movie where it's abundantly clear that like he is a con man. He is trying to seduce the princess only to steal the diamond from her, the Pink Panther diamond. And there's some scenes where it's purposely left ambiguous that what's going on here, who's on whose side over here, and you're, as an audience member, you're meant to figure that out. But when you have already half the information, it's not that difficult to figure it out because like okay, the one example is that when Clouseau first comes, the whole movie is set inside a hotel, and it's set under the sort of presumption of the movie is that the Princess Dala has come to stay in a hotel in the Swiss Alps, or like some snowy mountain. I'm assuming it's the Swiss Alps because it's a very fancy European place to be for high society people in the 60s. And the Phantom is also scheduled to attend this area. And Clouseau gets a tip about this, and he is after the Phantom, and he knows that the Phantom does a lot of high class robberies. So, hearing that the princess is going to be there with the Pink Panther diamond, and hearing that the Phantom is going to be there, he heads down there with his wife, and they go like, and I guess Clouseau's plan is to go and stake it out. That also is not made very clear. But as soon as he enters the hotel, he just like immediately runs into the Phantom and falls right in front of his face. And he says, "Oh, that's Sir Charles Lytton, the Phantom." And then later in the movie, there's a reveal that happens with one of the main characters where it's revealed that Sir Charles Lytton is the Phantom. And like, but you've told us this movie. Why are you telling this? Why are you telling us again? Why is it to show us that this character has learned that he's the Phantom? But everyone knows that he's the Phantom. It's like if Clouseau knows it, and Clouseau is supposed to be the most inept person who, is kind of the last person to know everything. If he knows it, how does the rest of the world not know it yet? And I guess you can kind of explain away some of that, but I just felt like the movie couldn't decide on what his focus was, because it was sometimes focused on this like crime story with Charles Lytton, and sometimes it was focused on this funny slapstick detective story with Clouseau. And I gotta say, when they focus on Clouseau, it's some of the best scenes in the movie, and it's really a shame for this movie because the beginning of this movie, you're introduced to all of the supporting characters, and I think at the very end of the opening sequence, you're introduced to Clouseau, or towards the end of it, and his moments are great. But then you're immediately shuttered off back to Sir Charles Lytton's story, and you see the setup for his con, and you see his whole perspective on the series of events that unfold at this hotel in the Swiss Alps. And that's fine, and I also was fine with it in the beginning, but all I kept waiting for was that okay, when's Clouseau gonna show up? When's Clouseau gonna show up? Because he should be the focus of these movies. He's the detective, he's after the Pink Panther. It's his singular focus as a character. So why aren't we seeing that? And it's just I found it very confusing that he wasn't a bigger part of the film. And he does come in later. He comes in the second half, and that's when the movie really takes off for me, is because they just let Peter Sellers just go off the rails and do what he wants. And the story is also serving Clouseau, and Clouseau is a character who can literally just do anything in the scene, and it kind of works, and it's hilarious. So it's a big aid to the movie that way. But in the first half of the movie, you're constantly being shuttered to and fro from Lytton's story, and Lytton's story it's not interesting, but it's not where the focus should be for this movie, because in the end it doesn't feel like a truly special or like separate Pink Panther movie. It just feels like another movie about a old con man who just happens to have like the Pink Panther involved and Clouseau involved and him being the Phantom. It just feels very incidental. It doesn't feel like it was a specifically Pink Panther-esque story. And I guess that comes from me having watched The Return of the Pink Panther first and then coming to this movie. If I'd seen this first and then gone to The Return of the Pink Panther, I might have found it the other way and found it really odd. But think I thought about that a lot, and what I figured was The Return of the Pink Panther is still always way funnier than this first movie. So even if I did see it the other way around, I'm sure I would enjoy The Return of the Pink Panther more, just because that's when they really figure out how to use Peter Sellers and how to use Clouseau's character, and it completely shifts the focus of the movie and makes it so much better. Okay, again sitting here with my notes as usual of Tana movies with Tana as Tana. There's just so much to talk about that I'm just all over the place trying to figure it out. Um, Okay, yeah. So a prime example of the fact that Blake Edwards just didn't know how to use Clouseau or didn't write Clouseau properly is that there's literally a scene in like about the midpoint of the movie where Clouseau is literally just standing in the background talking to somebody, and that's when I went like, what? I really just took a step back from the movie and I was like, what? What is he doing? It's a Pink Panther movie, and I'm literally seeing Clouseau talk in the background with some guy who's like not a big character in the movie, and he hasn't been there till now. I've literally This is the first time I've seen him in like 20 minutes, and that was I remember thinking that's insane, that this just shouldn't be happening in a Pink Panther movie. It was just uh like he doesn't have any effect on the story till the second half. He's just a background character. It's only in the second half when things happen to him that make him proactive. It's not him going around detecting and finding out clues. The clue literally falls into his room and in front of him, and that's what makes him behave proactively. And you know, that's only when things start to happen and ramp up in the movie. And I'm quite a big fan of the ending of this movie. It's one of the brighter moments of this film where it just ramps up the comedy, it ramps up the camp of the story. It lets Peter Sellers just do an amazing job as Clouseau. It even lets Charles Litton become a really comedic character, and a lot of the what is that? Mosquitoes there in my room. It lets Charles Litton, his nephew, all of these characters that has been slowly kind of building up with this like drama storyline, finally get to exercise their comedy chops a little bit in the end sequences of this movie. And I feel like I think at that point or something or the other, they just figured out that okay, this is the way the movie should be. Is just this full comedy and just jam pack as many types of jokes and as many jokes as possible, because that's all people want to see. And all of these people were competent actors who could do it if they needed to. It's just that they needed that material to work with. And I think that's all I have to say about the first movie, is that it was a little bit disappointing in terms of story, but in terms of visual style, both of these movies have fantastic visual style. This first one, I don't think I talk about it too much, but it has a very angular approach to it. I think is probably the best word to describe it, where it kind of felt like I was watching a detective noir story at some points, but it also sometimes felt like I was just plopped into the scene, and there were very few dynamic camera movements that happened for a majority of the scenes. Majority of the scenes you just kind of had one shot, then two shot, and the camera just was placed in different areas, and the actors just acted out. The camera never moved with them. It never peeked over to the side. It never did anything quite interesting like it does in the second movie. It just sort of stood there, and that's I think added to kind of the boring aspect of those Charles Litton scenes, is that it never felt exciting. And Cannon strikes again. I don't know where it has stopped. So I'm just gonna repeat my last point where um, the cinematography in the first movie just was not as dynamic as I would have liked, and I feel like that added a lot of why I found it a little bit more boring than the second movie, where the second movie employs a lot more dynamic camera movements and just a lot more interesting visuals than compared to the first one, where the first one is very plain and it's beautiful. It's definitely beautiful and has beautiful set design and beautiful uh, shots in terms of just pure cinematography, but not a lot of dynamic movement, not a lot of interesting, like, peculiar shots, so to speak. And I feel like that could have also pushed this movie a long way in terms of just keeping the audience attention there, wherein it just doesn't have it. There are parts that are just definitely big gold moments. Like, one of my favorite lines from this movie is a part where in the beginning, where the Charles Litton is trying to con the princess. He attempts to steal her dog, and he has a man working with him, and they successfully steal a dog, and the whole plan is for Charles Litton to save the dog, to kind of be like this knight in shining armor person for the princess. And it just goes fully awry, and you have Charles Litton just on his ass, sitting kind of looking up, and the princess gets her dog back though, and Charles Litton's accomplice is like, okay, she's got the dog, I'll see you later. And it's a very random abrupt line, and I just loved that because the accomplice is like, okay, cool, she got the dog, it doesn't matter how things went, but she ended up getting the dog, so I'm gonna leave now. And I found that to be particularly a funny line for that movie. It was very plain and matter of fact, and I don't know why, but I found that really hilarious. And the movie kind of has a lot of moments like that, especially towards the end, where Clouseau figures out that the Phantom is trying to steal the Pink Panther diamond, and he makes that connection and all of that, and what ensues after that. I really don't want to spoil any of that because that's easily the best part of the movie. So that's something, definitely, if for nothing else, watch this movie for the end sequence because it's well worth the wait. The film is not a bad film by any means. It's very, very, very nice film, and it's just, maybe that's the thing. It's having seen this as the second Pink Panther movie I've seen, although not like, yeah, second Pink Panther movie that I've seen chronologically, even though it's technically the first movie. That may has that has probably affected a lot of my opinion on it, but it's still a great movie. It's still very funny, and it's very beautiful. And maybe I didn't like the dramatic parts of it, but I'm sure if someone else watches it, they might enjoy those parts of it a lot and find something that I just don't even notice about it because I'm expecting something else from the characters and the movie itself. So it's definitely worth a watch because the Pink Panther movies are just like complete classics, and you should definitely check that out. It's the Pink Panther, directed by Blake Edwards, and came out in 1963. Now we are gonna talk about my favorite movie, and this is gonna be a little bit of a shorter discussion because like I said in the beginning, I do not want to spoil this movie at all, but I do desperately want to talk about it, and I have a lot of stuff that I want to talk about it. So, the animated sequence, like I must have said before, much, much, much better than the first one. It's packed with so much visual detail, it's packed with so many little jokes. It has references to other animated franchises. It has a lot more story in it. It has a lot more visual gags that are specific to each department of film that it's talking about. I could talk about every single frame of it and every single credit that it visually displays, and I could spend the whole video talking about that. But like I said, this movie is something to be experienced, and I do not want to necessarily spoil any more than I have to for it. So now I'm gonna talk. So with the animated sequence, like, this is what there's so much rushing in my head about this movie. I have to like keep looking at my notes to make sure I don't go off track and don't talk about something that's too spoilery or just I can ramble on about this movie forever. So, animated sequence, amazing. Just for the, if nothing else, just for that animated sequence is worth a watch. And then one of my favorite parts of this movie is the cinematography. Um, it's I think the reason why this is one of my favorite movies is just because of how beautifully it's shot. From the very first frame to the very last frame, it's so good. It's so good. It has this beautiful visual style where when it has to be, it can be very nice and stylistic and play with shadows and play with very minimal light in the scene, and play with a lot of unique framing where, like in the beginning, where basically a lot to do with this return of the Pink Panther movie is a complete reinvention of the whole concept of the Pink Panthers. So the movie kind of starts off with another heist, wherein you see the Pink Panther diamond being stolen, and that whole sequence is just like chef's kiss. It's so good because you have these really nice tight close-up shots of the crossbow that the thief is using. Then as he's being lowered in, he's putting oil on the floor to kind of slip his way under the laser detectors. It's ooh, I love it. I love every part of it, and it's so good. And okay, so that's just one part of it. You have so I what I have chosen to describe it as a really graphic framing, like a graphic novel, where literally each shot is like a really beautifully designed panel of a comic book or a graphic novel, and it feels like each shot has purpose to it, especially in that opening sequence of the heist where the diamond is being stolen. You have these really nice shots of the light shining on the crossbow. You have shots of the guards standing in between statues, and I love the visual storytelling and like the imagery with that, where like these guards are about like as useless as the statues that they're standing next to, because they can't even detect this guy coming to steal the most precious diamond that's there in the museum. It's so good. I'm just thinking about it now and I'm gushing over it. Then, for a lot of the movie, even the parts, a lot of the cinematography for this movie gets split down the middle with scenes with Clouseau and scenes with Charles Lytton, the reimagined Charles Lytton. And both of them have very different visual styles, but they also both employ a lot of the same techniques, wherein with scenes with Clouseau, the visual style is very simple and very like you kind of stay a little bit wide, because a lot of the Clouseau scenes has Peter Sellers walking and chewing the scenery and just kind of interacting with the environment, and that's where he develops the comedy from the scenes. Is that he's either going through a revolving door or he's posing as a phone repairman, and you basically allow him to just kind of perform his scene and perform the comedy that you have come here to see. So the camera doesn't move too much. It gives you a little bit of space to let Peter Sellers roam around, but it never once lets you feel bored with the cinematography. You never feel like you've just been plopped into the scene. You feel like you're on stage, like Peter Sellers is on stage and you're watching him perform these amazing comedic sequences. And I think that's a testament to the fact of interesting framing, wherein even in the beginning sequence, it's a lot of static shots. The camera doesn't move a whole lot, but because of how nicely these shots are framed, the brain is kind of like adjusting to it, and you're kind of taking you're taking in the really beautiful imagery, which is the set design, the actors, the framing of the whole shot, all of that you're taking in, and you're also getting to see this visual delight of the slapstick comedy that's taking place. And I think that compared to the first movie is a big step up in terms of Clouseau's scenes, and also just there's just much more of them. Clouseau is in probably 85% of the movie. There are quite a few long Charles Lytton scenes, but they don't take up a big chunk of the movie. Majority, you're constantly following Clouseau, you're following his investigation and his like complete inept to fucking solve any crime. It's definitely the thing that was needed from the first movie, and I'm glad Blake Edwards figured it out with his co-writer, and I'm glad he got such a skilled cinematographer who was able to just completely create this fantastic European world where Clouseau can exist and just wreak havoc. There's a particular line by one of the main characters, Chief Inspector Dreyfuss, where when Clouseau is in Switzerland, he's like, the Swiss Alps, a paradise now, by tomorrow. Uh, wait, I have the line written down. I'm gonna see if I can find it. Do I have it? Yeah, okay. Today a paradise. So the line is today a paradise in the Swiss Alps, tomorrow a wasteland. And I love that because it's a very dramatic way of saying that Clouseau's just gonna come and completely fuck shit up in the best possible way, and it's a great character line for Dreyfuss. The writing on this movie is really what stands out to me the most because the way the scenes are written, the dialogue that is written, there's so many layers to the comedy of this movie. There's the dialogues which are hilarious throughout. There's the physical comedy that's hilarious throughout, and then Clouseau, Peter Sellers has his own just internal layers of comedy where he created the iconic heavy French accent for Clouseau, where he'll say the complete sentences in a normal way, but then he'll say separate words which in a completely odd way that make no sense, like minky or room or fond, and it's such a joy to see the other characters around him just not understanding what he's trying to say. So back to the visual style of it. So the Clouseau style is very specific, but then you also get a Lytton style. And the whole reinvention of Charles Lytton in this movie is something that completely again works in its favor, and it just boosts the movie even more than it did with the inclusion of Clouseau. Where in the first movie, the character of Charles Lytton is kind of the focus of the movie, and he has his own like journey, and the whole movie is about kind of his con. Where in the second movie, he's introduced as this, very suave, sophisticated, beautiful man, but he's retired and he's no longer the Phantom, and he's the introduction to him is him literally sitting in his fantastic, beautiful villa in France, somewhere in France, and he's literally painting canvases with the word dull in different artistic styles. And I think that's the perfect way to introduce a character who is just so bored. And I love that because you have someone who, when you meet him and when you hear about him as a character, you're like, oh wow, he's going to be this cool, eccentric guy. But he's the character who's yearning for the most excitement out of anyone. He wants his life to be exciting again. So then when the plot of this movie kind of kicks into motion, he immediately has agency because now the Pink Panther diamond has been stolen, but it's not him. It's someone pretending to be the Phantom, and that immediately propels his story into motion, and he's given a much better storyline than compared to the first movie, where in the first movie it's about him trying to con someone, where in this movie it's about him being his own detective and trying to figure out who stole the Pink Panther diamond in the first place. So you have these dual detective stories going on throughout the movie, where you have Clouseau's hilarious inept search for the Pink Panther diamond, and you have Lytton's super suave James Bondy type approach to finding the Pink Panther diamond, and he takes him to Lugash, and it takes him to this, very uh, beautifully set designed club in Lugash, and very, I don't know how to describe it, but very Eastern, I guess would be the word for it. Just very authentically different from what you're seeing on Clouseau's side, which is very clean and European, and this is a lot more messy and a lot more colorful. And even the sequences are shot completely differently, wherein Clouseau's scenes have a lot of nice framing, but a lot of still cameras. With Lytton scenes, it's full moving cameras throughout. There's these crash zooms, there's long panning shots, there are these amazing close up shots that zoom out slowly to reveal the rest of the environment. And it's just a complete different visual style. And it also, I think, what really works in its favor is that you're laughing throughout when, at least for me, I was laughing throughout when I was seeing the scenes with Clouseau. And when I got to the scenes with Lytton, it gave me a nice breather. But not in a sense that it was boring or it just didn't make me laugh. It was a breather in the sense that, okay, that was the time to laugh. Now I have a minute to kind of get nicely involved in this, cool guy detective story as he searches for the real thief of the Pink Panther. Pink Panther. And it's a nice balance between extreme slapstick comedy and also a nice detective story, because you're not really gonna get a real detective story from Clouseau, but the inclusion of Charles Lytton and making him the guy who's really looking for the diamond as well is a nice way to juxtapose the two of them and create this detective storyline subplot within your Clouseau story as well. And I really like that inclusion. And that's not something that I immediately got as a kid. And it's only on later viewings I've understood the significance of his whole subplot. And Charles, if I'm right, Christopher Plummer, I almost said Charles Plummer. Christopher Plummer plays Lytton to perfection. Compared to the first movie, he is a much better interpretation of the character, the Phantom, and plays him much more like a retired James Bond or like a retired Bond villain who was not that bad. A little bit a nice, confident con man. Someone who you really wouldn't want to be, but he's pretty cool. He's a pretty cool guy. um, I think the last couple of things I want to talk about with this movie is the introductions of like staple characters that come on in later movies and like are really famous characters connected to Clouseau, Chief Inspector Dreyfuss and Cato. So Chief Inspector Dreyfuss is the foil to Clouseau, where he just absolutely hates Clouseau, and it's hilarious. Every scene with Dreyfuss is like the cherry on top of a Clouseau scene, where he has this iconic like giggle which he does just to express his complete disdain for Clouseau, and the whole subplot with Dreyfuss is that he is trying insanely hard to kill Clouseau, who he thinks is a complete idiot. But he is unable to kill him. No matter how hard he tries to kill Clouseau, he is not able to do it. And slowly over the course of the movie, it drives him completely mad. And it's a great little subplot about someone who's seemingly the normal person who gets driven mad just by Clouseau's complete ineptitude. And I find he is easily one of my favorite characters of the whole movie because of his scenes and the way he's portrayed by Herbert Lom is a just fantastic portrayal of him. I don't want to spoil anything about what he does or says throughout the movie because it's definitely worth experiencing in the movie itself. I did give you a little bit of a spoiler saying that he's constantly trying to kill Clouseau, but the way he goes about it and the way it's played across in the movie is definitely more exciting than hearing that he just tries to kill Clouseau. The second one is Cato. So Cato is a big staple character of the movies and very famously connected to Clouseau. In this movie, he has a little bit of problematic, like racism that's connected to his character, where he called a, a few racial slurs, not heavy racial slurs, but light racial slurs that are definitely not okay to talk about today. Like they talk about having Oriental food and the fact that sometimes Cato cooks for Clouseau, and a few other instances that are just, I feel like, just a product of the time and not necessarily meant to poke fun directly at his race or anything like that, because the character is not about his race. I don't think, at least. It definitely has something to do with his race, but I don't feel like it was ever uh, chosen or written to be like, okay, we're going to have this Chinese character to make fun of Chinese people. It's there just because, in the context of the story, and I guess in the context of the time that this story and movie was made and set in, it was probably something more acceptable to do. But it's definitely not something acceptable today. But he's still a pretty great character. For anyone who doesn't know, I'll give you a brief introduction to Cato's character. Cato is like Clouseau's body man, who's like his butler, He cleans up after him, helps him get dressed. It's very old school butler type duties. But there's a twist to that. To keep Clouseau's instincts that he insists that he has, to keep them sharp, Cato will constantly attack Clouseau at the most random of times, and each sequence with Cato is hilarious, and it has a very unique quality to them, which includes a little bit of slow mo footage, which it immediately elevates those sequences to a higher level of comedy than it would already, with how funny they are and the performance by Cato. And it's just they're really nice, light, funny scenes that just make you laugh, and they're not there to make you think, and just to make you have a good laugh with them. And I feel like that's the importance of Cato's character, is that he's just there to make you laugh, and he's just there to add a little lightness to the rest of the movie, and kind of give you another, again, just a nice breather in between the story of the movie, and kind of like, okay, reset you that, okay, all of the, you're getting a lot of information that's happening story wise, and then when Cato shows up, you know that you're getting a little bit of a break, and it's not expressingly telling you this, but as of like, because I've seen this movie so many times, I feel like that's what I get out of the Cato scenes, is that it's a nice breather from the story, but it's just as hilarious, and it doesn't take away anything from the movie at all. And yeah, that's all I really want to say about this movie without spoiling it. And I could talk about it into more spoilers, but the thing is, there are two more movies that I'm going to talk about. There's the Pink Panther Strikes Again, and there's The Revenge of the Pink Panther. They both still star Peter Sellers. I don't know who they're directed by, but I know that The Revenge of the Pink Panther is a direct sequel to The Return of the Pink Panther, because it's supposed to take place when Chief Inspector Dreyfuss finally goes mad and is admitted to an insane asylum, and kind of his uh, kind of plan to try and take down Clouseau. And I'm very excited to talk about that movie. So this is going to be part one of the Pink Panther movies that I'm going to talk about. This first one was about Pink Panther and the Return of the Pink Panther, and part two next week is going to be about the Revenge of the Pink Panther and the Pink Panther Strikes Again. I keep messing those titles up, so you please forgive me about that. But yes, Pink Panther has been a long time favorite character of mine, and I really hope that after watching this video, you check out the Pink Panther from 1963 and the Return of the Pink Panther, especially from 1975. Uh, my favorite movie of all time. To find it online, it might be a little bit difficult. I think your best bet is to just take a little bit, take a little look on YouTube and see what you can find. But it's a very famous movie, obviously, with the remake and just how iconic the character is. So I'm sure you'll be able to find it somewhere or the other. You just type in the name and you type in the date, and who knows? You might find it a little bit easier than you thought you might. Yeah, I think that's it. And thank you for watching. Bye.